Humble waitress helps a stranger fix his car, then sees her missing pendant on his neck. Sophie Reynolds never expected that one stormy afternoon at the Redwood Diner would change her life forever. She was a kind-hearted waitress, used to handling tough shifts and bigger-than-life problems, even the heartbreak of a missing family heirloom. But when a mysterious stranger pulled up with a sputtering engine and a desperate plea for help, Sophie didn't think twice about lending a hand at all. Little did she know this small act of kindness would unravel secrets that stretched back years, exposing the true meaning behind a treasured pendant. As thunder boomed overhead, Sophie's life took a turn no one, least of all her, could have foreseen. Sophie Reynolds had worked at the Redwood Diner in Denver, Colorado for nearly 5 years. The diner itself was modest, sitting on a well-traveled corner of Colfax Avenue. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, promising hot coffee and home-cooked meals to truckers, night shift workers, and the occasional lost tourist. Sophie's regulars loved her for her warm smile and genuine interest in their lives. She had a knack for making strangers feel at home. Yet behind that friendly demeanor lay a heavy burden. Sophie's mother, Caroline Evans, had fallen ill 18 months ago. Sophie's tips barely covered the mounting medical bills at Porter Adventist Hospital. She picked up every extra shift, never complained, and always arrived early to wipe down tables or stock the newly arrived shipments of coffee beans. Her co-workers admired her grit, but they also worried about the toll it was taking on her. Her eyes showed exhaustion. Her once lively laughter had become rare, and the sparkle in her gaze had dimmed. Sophie had grown up just an hour away, in Aurora. She'd moved to Denver right after her 18th birthday, determined to find independence and help support her mother. Her father was out of the picture. He had walked away years before, leaving only one precious heirloom behind a delicate silver pendant shaped like a heart with a small sapphire sewn in the center. It had been Sophie's one source of comfort, an object she associated with hope and memory. To her devastation, it disappeared a few months earlier, stolen from her tiny apartment after a break-in. The police hadn't found any leads. Sophie felt the loss deeply. That Wednesday afternoon, a fierce thunderstorm swept into the city. Rain battered the streets, drenching everyone unlucky enough to be outside. Inside the Redwood Diner, Sophie hustled between tables, her ponytail swishing as she topped up coffees and balanced plates stacked with burgers and fries. The hum of conversation mingled with the clinking of utensils. Near closing time, the door swung open, letting in a gust of wind and a frantic man in a drenched navy jacket. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked to be in his early 30s, with steady blue eyes that darted around the diner, taking in every detail. The name tag on his jacket said Jonathan, but that was all Sophie could glean at a glance. She grabbed a dish rag and instinctively hurried over, offering him a place to sit and a towel to dry himself. "Car trouble," Jonathan muttered breathlessly, chest heaving. "My engine started smoking right outside. I saw your lights on, didn't know where else to go." He seemed frazzled, worried, or maybe just exhausted. Sophie guided him to an empty stool at the counter. "You came to the right place," she said warmly, despite the weariness tugging at her. "We can figure something out. Let me get you a hot drink." Jonathan nodded, relief flooding his features. As Sophie busied herself preparing the coffee extra strong, she decided she couldn't help but notice the anxious way he drummed his fingers on the counter. He thanked her quietly when she placed the steaming mug in front of him, and for a moment he seemed lost in his own thoughts. "You know anything about engines?" he asked after a few beats of silence. "I'm traveling through, was supposed to meet someone in town, and my car's giving me trouble." Sophie wiped her hands on her apron. Her father had taught her the basics of car maintenance when she was young, and those memories still flickered warmly. "I know a bit," she said. "Let me finish up here, then I'll see if I can help you take a look." Thunder rumbled outside, and the rain drummed against the diner's windows like an urgent warning. Sophie had no idea that the simple decision to help this stranger would collide with the darkest mysteries of her past. She only knew that someone needed a hand, and she couldn't leave him stranded in the downpour. The sky had turned inky black by the time the last customer left. Sophie locked the front door and flipped the sign from open to closed. The scent of fresh rain drifted in from outside, accompanied by the faint crackle of distant thunder. Jonathan still sat at the counter, cradling his coffee, as if it were a lifeline. "You sure you want to help me?" he asked, hesitant. "You've already had a long day. I can call a tow truck or something." Sophie forced a small smile. "I really don't mind. Let me grab my jacket." She rummaged in the back room, slipped into a windbreaker, and came out to find Jonathan on his feet, gazing around the empty diner. It struck Sophie how alone and out of place he looked. Maybe she recognized something in him, some quiet desperation that reminded her of how she felt when she got the news about her mother's diagnosis. Outside, they hurried to Jonathan's car, a silver sedan parked haphazardly under a flickering street lamp. The rain had ebbed into a gentle drizzle. Sophie leaned over the engine, checking the oil dipstick, examining the spark plugs, and using her phone's flashlight to search for any obvious issue. "It's overheating," she muttered, brow creased in concentration. "Coolant levels are low, possibly a leak in the radiator." Jonathan hovered anxiously, his hands shoved into his wet pockets. "I noticed the temperature gauge spiking earlier," he said. "Any chance we could fix it here?" Sophie shrugged, a few stray raindrops snaking down her cheeks. "We might patch it enough for you to get to the nearest garage in the morning. Let me see." They spent the next 20 minutes tinkering under the hood. Sophie found a small crack in the radiator hose. She patched it temporarily with duct tape she kept in her own car. By the time she finished, her windbreaker was soaked, and her jeans clung to her legs. "You'll need a more permanent fix," Sophie explained as she shut the hood. "But this should hold you until morning." Jonathan's shoulders loosened. "Thank you so much. I owe you." "Seriously." He glanced away, looking almost shy. In that moment, the street lamp flickered back to life, casting a yellowish glow that illuminated Jonathan's face and something around his neck. Sophie froze, her breath catching in her throat. There, resting against his collarbone, was a small silver pendant shaped like a heart with a sapphire stone at its center. Her mind reeled. It looked exactly like the heirloom that had been stolen from her apartment. She tried to think rationally. Maybe it was just a similar design, or maybe somehow some cosmic coincidence. Yet her heart hammered in her chest and she felt the blood drain from her face. Jonathan, oblivious to her sudden shock, turned back toward her. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sophie managed to steady her voice, though her hands were trembling. "Yeah. That necklace. Where'd you get it?" He immediately reached up, fingering the pendant. His expression flickered from confusion to guardedness. "Oh, this." "It was a gift," he said, his tone cautious. "Why?" She wanted to accuse him right then, demand to know if he was the one who broke into her apartment. But she held herself back, remembering how lost and genuine he'd seemed. It felt incongruous to match that impression with a thief. Yet the sight of the pendant that so closely resembled her lost heirloom made her stomach churn. "Just curious," she managed. "It's beautiful," I had something similar once. There was a palpable silence as the rain picked up again, tapping on the hood of the car. Sophie raked her hair back, water dripping onto her forehead. Jonathan nodded, though the tension in the air was unmistakable. "Yeah," he finally said. "It is. I've worn it for a while now. It's important to me." Sophie forced a polite smile, but her mind was swirling with questions. Why did he have it? Was it truly hers, or just a coincidence? If it was hers, how on earth had it ended up with him? She inhaled, recalling the detective she'd once spoken to, Detective James Miller from the Aurora PD, who said that stolen jewelry often ended up in pawn shops. Could Jonathan have purchased it unknowingly? As the drizzle turned into a steady downpour again, Sophie realized she couldn't keep him out in the rain. "Look, it's late," she said, trying to sound normal. "I live about 10 minutes away. My apartment's small, but you can crash on the couch if you want. Otherwise, you'll need to get a motel somewhere." It was an impulsive offer, one that Sophie wasn't entirely comfortable with. Yet some part of her needed to keep him close to investigate that pendant further. Perhaps get a better look at it under the light check for the tiny scratch on the back that her father had made when he was working on it years ago. Jonathan appeared taken aback. "Wow, you've already done so much for me," he said quietly. "I don't want to impose." But Sophie gave a shrug, brushing aside her own growing unease. "It's fine, really. Let's just get out of the rain, okay?" And so, side by side, the two strangers climbed into Sophie's battered old sedan. As she started the engine, her heart thrummed with a wild mixture of fear and anticipation. She couldn't shake the image of that pendant from her mind, and something told her that the night's revelations were only beginning. Sophie's apartment was tucked in an aging brick complex near Denver's Park Hill neighborhood. Paint peeled from the stairway walls, and the overhead lights flickered with an unsettling hum. She led Jonathan up 2 flights of worn steps, her thoughts spinning the entire way. This was the place that had been violated months earlier when she returned home to find her front door ajar and her heirloom missing. The sense of intrusion had lingered ever since. Inside the apartment itself was sparse, but calm. Mismatched thrift store furniture, a second-hand rug covering the scuffed wooden floor, and a small TV propped on a reclaimed bookshelf. Sophie flicked on a warm lamp. Jonathan hovered in the doorway, uncertainty etched on his face. "Make yourself at home," she offered, gesturing to the couch. "I'll grab towels." He gave a nod of thanks, stepping inside. "It's nice," he commented politely. His eyes slid across the family photos on the wall. Most of them of Sophie and her mother, Caroline Evans. A pang tore through Sophie as she watched him recalling how her mother always told her that good deeds come full circle. Sophie quickly ducked into the hallway closet to collect some fresh towels. The events of the evening spun in her head, the chance encounter, the stolen pendant, Jonathan's cautious admission that it was important to him. She couldn't decide whether to confront him outright or gather more information first. She returned and handed Jonathan a towel, noticing how he looked around the apartment. A hush settled between them, thick with unasked questions. "If you're hungry," she said, "I've got leftovers. I know a night at the Redwood Diner probably didn't fill you up." He smiled faintly. "I'm okay for now. Thanks." Sophie set about heating some water for tea, partly to busy her trembling hands. Every so often, she stole a glance at Jonathan, who'd set his jacket on a chair and was dabbing rain from his hair. The pendant glinted under the overhead light, and Sophie's breath caught. She remembered the details of her own pendant perfectly, the silver chain, the shape of the heart, and the tiny scratch at the back of the sapphire stone, a testament to her father's accident while polishing it. If she could just get a closer look, perhaps the truth would be undeniable. As if reading her thoughts, Jonathan touched the pendant again, almost nervously. "You mentioned you had something similar," he ventured. "What happened to it?" Her heart skipped a beat. "It was stolen. A few months ago." He hesitated, something flickering in his gaze. "That's awful. I'm sorry." Sophie poured boiling water into a mug and handed it to him. "Thanks," she whispered. She swallowed hard. "Was yours a family heirloom?" He stared into the steaming liquid for a moment, as though searching for a way to respond. "Sort of," he finally said. "It came from someone very close to me. It's one of the few things I have left of them." Sophie's chest tightened. She couldn't reconcile this scenario in her mind, if this truly was her stolen pendant. How had it come to mean so much to him? Was it possible he'd just come into possession of it through a pawn shop, as Detective Miller once speculated? The idea that Jonathan himself had stolen it seemed less likely with every passing minute. There was a sincerity in his eyes, a haunted sincerity. The tension reached a crescendo when Jonathan looked directly at her, an apology dancing on his lips. "Look, I know you must be suspicious," he began. "I can sense it. But if you need to see this pendant to look at it here." With a tentative hand, he slipped the pendant off and held it out to her. Sophie's heart pounded so hard that her vision blurred at the edges. Carefully she took it, feeling the metal warm from his body heat. She turned it over, and there, hidden behind the sapphire stone, was a tiny scratch, the same scratch her father had made. Emotions crashed over her in fierce waves. It was hers. She felt a surge of anger, confusion, even betrayal at the thought that Jonathan had it, but also an inexplicable pang of compassion, because he seemed as lost in this puzzle as she was. "This is mine," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My father gave it to me. It was stolen. How? How did you end up with it?" Jonathan closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "I didn't steal it," he said firmly. "I bought it from a man at a garage sale in Colorado Springs about 4 months ago. I swear I didn't know. I felt drawn to it. I can't explain it." Sophie couldn't tell if she believed him. Her tears threatened to spill. She clenched the pendant in her hand, the weight of her father's memory pressing on her. "But it's mine." She repeated the words, cracking. "It was all I had left from him." Jonathan looked torn, guilt flickering across his face. "I had no idea. It was never my intention. I'd never knowingly wear something stolen." Sophie released a shaky breath, the reality of the situation slicing through her. This man, a stranger mere hours ago, now carried a piece of her family in the form of that pendant, and he claimed to have connected with it, to have felt it calling to him somehow. Was that possible? Could the threads of fate be weaving them together for reasons they couldn't yet understand? As they stood there, the thunder outside rumbled again, and the rain intensified. Sophie felt the storm inside her own heart raging with unanswered questions and conflicting emotions. One thing was certain: the story behind her missing heirloom and Jonathan's involvement was far from over. After a prolonged silence, Sophie gently placed the pendant on her small kitchen table. The weight of the moment pressed heavily in the cramped apartment, accentuated by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the windowpane. Jonathan cleared his throat, stepping closer. "I want you to know something," he said. "The night I bought it, my life was in pieces. I was mourning someone I lost. This pendant, your pendant, felt like a beacon of hope, as if it belonged to me or was meant to find me. I realize how crazy that must sound. Sophie studied his face. There was sincerity, an almost childlike vulnerability in his eyes, though anger and confusion still burned within her. Another emotion emerged: empathy. She could sense his pain, mirrored in the heartbreak she'd endured after losing her father, then her mother's declining health and the pendant theft. "I'm not sure what to say," Sophie replied quietly. "It's mine. I've missed it desperately. But I also see what it means to you. It just doesn't make any sense how fate put us on this collision course." Jonathan dragged a hand through his damp hair. "I'll give it back to you," he said. "I never wanted something that wasn't mine. I just can't shake the feeling there's something more to this. Something bigger than both of us." Sophie chewed her lip. A swirl of questions peppered her mind. Who sold the pendant at a garage sale in Colorado Springs? Could that person be linked to the break-in at her apartment? And why did Jonathan, a complete stranger, feel so connected to an heirloom that belonged to her father? Her father, James Reynolds, had died tragically in an accident when she was 7. She'd never known him well, but she cherished the stories her mother told, how James once traveled far for work, how he had a gift for fixing broken machines, how he poured his heart into everything he did. The silver pendant with the sapphire was one of the few physical memories Sophie had of him. "Look," Sophie said, swallowing hard. "We need answers. I know someone, a Detective James Miller, who helped me file a report when my apartment was broken into. Maybe he can trace who sold the pendant to you. I still have the police report somewhere." Jonathan nodded, relieved. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove I'm not the bad guy here, and to help you get the closure you need." The idea of rummaging through old police files dredged up painful memories for Sophie, but she realized the necessity. She glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. "Let's figure it out tomorrow," she said. "For tonight, I guess you can stay here. The couch is yours." "Thank you," Jonathan responded softly. "I promise I won't get in your way, and I'll leave in the morning if that's what you want." Sophie forced a faint smile, though her thoughts continued to churn. "We'll see," she answered. "For now, let's just call it a night." She laid a spare blanket and pillow on the couch for Jonathan. He seemed grateful but haunted, as if he could feel the weight of Sophie's turmoil filling the tiny apartment. While Sophie retreated to her bedroom, she couldn't deny the knot of anxiety in her stomach. A stranger who possessed her stolen heirloom was sleeping in her living room. Yet she felt more curiosity than fear at that moment. Before she could close the door fully, Jonathan's voice stopped her. "Sophie." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "I really am sorry," he said. "I never meant any harm." Their eyes met across the dimly lit space, and Sophie found herself nodding, though her emotions remained tangled. "We'll get to the bottom of it," she said, softly, shutting the door. For a long time, she lay awake, listening to the storm's lullaby. Her father's face swam through her dreams, and her mother's weak smile reminded her of why she worked so hard every day. By the time she finally fell asleep, her dreams were filled with images of the pendant, an old garage sale, and unanswered questions swirling in the rain-soaked night. Morning arrived slowly, with grey light filtering through half-closed blinds. Sophie awoke with a start, her mind instantly returning to the events of the previous night. Was it all a dream? She glanced into the living room and found Jonathan asleep on the couch, his face turned toward the back cushions. The pendant. Her pendant sat on the kitchen table where she'd left it. She dressed quickly and made coffee, the smell of the brew filling the small apartment. By the time Jonathan stirred, Sophie was busy scanning the top drawer of her desk, searching for the police report from months ago. It didn't take long to find the battered folder labeled "Break-in." Inside was Detective James Miller's card, a typed witness statement, and an inventory of missing items, including the pendant. "Morning." Jonathan's voice came from behind her, raspy with sleep. He rubbed his eyes and tentatively stepped closer. "I hope you slept okay." Sophie bit her lip, flipping the pages. "I slept," she answered, guarded. "Here's the police report. Detective Miller is with the Aurora PD, but maybe he can help us track down where the pendant went. If you're really serious about helping." Jonathan nodded. "I am," he said quietly. "Let's do it." The unspoken tension still lingered between them, an undercurrent of distrust tempered by the shared mission to unravel the truth. They decided to head over to the local station after breakfast. Sophie wanted some sense of normalcy first, so she quickly fried eggs and made toast. It was a quiet meal, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As Sophie washed the dishes, her phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed Dr. Mark Emerson, her mother's physician at Porter Adventist Hospital. Her chest tightened with worry. She picked it up, stepping into the hallway. "Hello, Dr. Emerson. Ms. Reynolds. Your mother's had a slight setback," the doctor's calm voice relayed. "She's stable, but we'll need you to come in to discuss some changes to her treatment." The blood drained from Sophie's face. Another medical complication meant more bills, more emotional strain. "I'll be there later today. Thanks for letting me know." Ending the call. She took a moment to breathe. Jonathan's voice called out from the kitchen. "Is everything all right?" Sophie wiped away the tear forming at the corner of her eye. "My mom's in the hospital. They need me. So, maybe we can't go to the police station just yet." Jonathan set his coffee mug down. "Then let me drive you," he offered. "We'll figure out the car situation later, or we can take yours. But you shouldn't go alone, right now." A swirl of gratitude and uncertainty fluttered in Sophie's chest. She barely knew him, yet he was offering support during one of her hardest trials. It reminded her of how her mother used to say that sometimes kindness comes from the most unexpected places. "All right," she agreed softly. "Let's go." They grabbed their things, Sophie ensuring she placed the pendant into her purse for safekeeping. While it felt odd to bring it along, a part of her couldn't bear to leave it behind again, just in case. They stepped out into the crisp morning air, the storm clouds having receded to reveal patches of blue sky. The air still smelled of rain. Sophie navigated the short drive to Porter Adventist Hospital with Jonathan in the passenger seat, his gaze flicking over the passing scenery. "You said your mom's been sick for a while," he asked gently. Sophie nodded, keeping her eyes on the road. "Ovarian cancer. She's gone through rounds of chemotherapy surgeries. It's been tough." Jonathan's expression softened, and he placed a hand on the seat, as if wanting to give reassurance, but not sure how. "I'm sorry. I lost someone to cancer a few years ago, my fiancée Rebecca. If you need to talk." Sophie's throat tightened. She felt a pang of sympathy for him, understanding that hollow place loss can carve into one's soul. "Thank you," she managed, casting a quick, grateful glance his way. When they arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere shifted to hushed sterility. Sophie rushed to her mother's room, leaving Jonathan in a small waiting area. Caroline Evans lay propped up on pillows, her face pale but her eyes warm when she saw Sophie. Dr. Emerson stood by, explaining the latest complications, a need for more imaging, a possible adjustment to her chemo regimen. Sophie held her mother's hand, nodding through the medical jargon, her mind spinning at how to afford another wave of bills. Through the open doorway, she caught a glimpse of Jonathan waiting patiently, concern etched on his face. Something about his presence felt oddly comforting, despite the strangeness of the situation that had brought him into her life. Once the doctor departed, Caroline noticed Sophie's anxious glances toward the hallway. "Who's that young man?" she asked, her voice weak but curious. Sophie hesitated, then forced a small smile. "Just someone who's helping me with something," she said. "He's been kind." Caroline squeezed Sophie's hand. "Kindness goes a long way," she murmured. "Don't forget that." The words echoed in Sophie's mind as she left her mother's room. Jonathan rose from the waiting chair, an unspoken question in his eyes. Sophie exhaled, trying to steady herself. "She's okay for now. Let's go talk to the detective." They headed out, the morning sun brightening the sky. Sophie's chest was tight with worry over her mother, but a new sense of determination filled her. She needed to solve the mystery of the pendant, to reclaim the piece of her father's memory that felt so essential to her identity. And strangely enough, Jonathan was walking right beside her, ready to face the truth, even if it revealed secrets they never expected. The drive to the Aurora Police Department was spent in terse silence, interrupted only by the grumble of rush-hour traffic. Sophie's thoughts kept flitting between her mother's precarious state and the familiar nervous anticipation of visiting Detective James Miller. They arrived at the station, a concrete building, surrounded by a sea of squad cars. Sophie and Jonathan stepped inside, weaving through the bustling corridors, where officers hurried with files and phones that buzzed incessantly. Sophie spotted Detective Miller near the front desk, a tall, lean figure with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual furrow in his brow. He recognized Sophie almost immediately. "Ms. Reynolds," he greeted, extending a firm handshake. "Been a while. Everything all right?" Sophie shook her head, pulling the pendant from her purse. "Detective, this is Jonathan. He ended up with my father's pendant, the one that was stolen." Miller's eyes flicked to Jonathan, then back to the jewelry. "No kidding." He tilted the pendant in the light, noting the scratch behind the sapphire. "And how did you come across this, sir?" Jonathan swallowed, meeting the detective's gaze. "I bought it at a garage sale in Colorado Springs a few months back. Didn't know it was stolen." Miller regarded him with practiced scrutiny. "And do you remember an address or a name of who sold it to you?" Jonathan hesitated. "Not exactly. It was an older man, maybe mid-60s, working out of his garage. I was on the way to see a friend near Colorado Springs, saw a sign for a sale, and stopped in. I paid $20 for it. That's all I remember." The detective's expression remained unreadable, but he nodded. "Okay. Let's go to my office and see what we can dig up. Maybe we can cross-reference recent sales or pawn shop transactions. It's a shot in the dark, but it's something." They followed him to a cramped office lined with file cabinets. A faint smell of old coffee clung to the air. Miller sat behind his desk, booted up a computer, and began typing. "How's your mother doing, by the way?" he asked, glancing at Sophie with genuine concern. "She's hanging in," Sophie replied, forcing a smile. "But I need to get this sorted. This pendant is all I have left from my father." Miller nodded, scanning the police report. He pulled up a database on his screen. "According to the initial report, your apartment break-in happened on January 14th. A few other items were missing. Electronics, jewelry, some cash. We suspect the thief might have tried to offload them quickly. Jonathan leaned in. Could it have landed at a pawn shop before it ended up at this garage sale? Or was that garage sale just a front? Miller shrugged. Possibly. Sometimes stolen goods make their way through multiple hands before they get sold to unsuspecting buyers like you. He typed in a few more queries. Our records show a local pawn shop near Colorado Springs, flagged for suspicious items around that time frame. Let me see if we have any details. They waited, hearts pounding. A minute later, Miller frowned, shaking his head. I have a partial lead. A man named George Beckett tried to pawn off several jewelry pieces, but the shop owner refused some because the ID he provided was questionable. The clerk reported it to us, but by the time we followed up, Beckett had vanished. We never made a solid connection to your case. Sophie's pulse quickened. Could that be the same guy Jonathan met? Could be, Miller replied. No guarantee, though. Jonathan rubbed his temples. If only I'd looked at a receipt or something. But it was cash. He seemed normal enough, just a guy with random knickknacks in his garage. Miller sighed, eyes flicking toward Sophie. We can try tracking him again. I'll put in a request for updated data on George Beckett. See if he's been arrested or if there's any new intel. In the meantime, I'll keep the pendant as evidence if you want. A flash of alarm gripped Sophie. Please, no, she said, her voice trembling. This is all I have left of my father. It's already been gone too long. Miller considered for a moment. All right, I understand. I'll take photographs and note the identifying scratch. Then you can hold on to it. But remember, it might need to be presented if this goes to court someday. Relief flooded Sophie's features. She handed the pendant over to Miller, watching closely as he photographed it under a desk lamp and tapped out notes on his computer. The process took only a few minutes, but to Sophie it felt like an eternity. Once done, he returned it to her. Keep it safe, he said, and let me know if you learn anything else. I'll call you if I get any hits on Beckett. They thanked the detective, leaving his office with a swirl of emotions. Out in the hallway, Sophie clutched the pendant as though it was newly returned treasure, which in many ways it was. Jonathan walked beside her, still sporting that pensive frown. I guess we wait, Sophie said, pushing open the station's heavy doors. Sunshine assaulted them outside, a stark contrast to the gloom they felt. Jonathan shoved his hands in his pockets. I feel like I should do more. This is my fault, in a way. Sophie shook her head. You didn't know. If anyone's to blame, it's the person who stole it in the first place. She studied him, uncertain but grateful. At least we have some direction now, George Beckett. Maybe we can dig around, see if we can find out more. He nodded, a steely resolve forming behind his eyes. I'll help. Whatever it takes. In that moment, Sophie realized she wasn't alone in her quest anymore. She had an ally, albeit a strange one, and together they might piece together the puzzle that fate had thrust upon them. The day was far from over, and so was their search for the truth. Little did they know the path ahead would lead them into more secrets and tangled histories than they ever imagined. They decided to stop at a local cafe for lunch, both hungry and craving a moment to process everything. The cafe, named Beacon and Brew, was bright and airy, with exposed brick walls and potted plants hanging by the windows. Jonathan found them a corner table by the window, away from the busier lunch crowd. Sophie sipped her iced tea, the pendant safely around her neck once more. She'd put it back on, the moment they left the station, desperate to reclaim its comforting presence. Across from her, Jonathan fiddled with a sugar packet, eyes distant. I can't help but think about that name, George Beckett, he said. I've never heard of him, But maybe I can ask around in Colorado Springs, see if anyone knows him, or if there's a community board that might have posted a garage sale listing for him. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. That's a start. I can also check with a friend of mine, Caroline Evans' neighbor, Mr. Thompson. He's a retired cop, used to dabble in private investigations after he left the force. He might have some ideas on how to track Beckett. Jonathan leaned forward. Anything. This has gone beyond just a stolen item. The more I think about it, the more I feel there's something bigger going on. Maybe it's just my imagination, but... He paused, scanning Sophie's face. You feel it too, she said softly, finishing his sentence. I don't know why, but this pendant seems to have a destiny of its own. They exchanged a small, unsure smile. Just days ago they were strangers. Now they found themselves bound by an heirloom that had touched both of their lives in unexpected ways. After paying the bill, Sophie checked her phone. A message from Dr. Emerson blinked on her screen. She quickly read it. Test results are in. Please call when you can. Sophie's stomach knotted. Another wave of anxiety about her mother washed over her. Everything okay? Jonathan asked gently. She forced a nod, though tears threatened to well. They're just test results. I'll call in a minute. She hesitated, then looked up at him. You don't have to stay with me through this, you know. Jonathan rested his elbows on the table, voice quiet. Sophie, you took me in without even knowing who I was. You helped me fix my car. You've shown me more kindness than most people I've known for years. Let me be here for you now. The sincerity in his words disarmed her. She nodded and stepped outside to find a quieter spot to call Dr. Emerson. Jonathan remained seated, giving her space. In the crisp afternoon air, Sophie dialed the hospital. Dr. Emerson's calm but serious tone informed her that Caroline's tumor markers were elevated. They wanted to explore more aggressive treatment or possibly a new trial. That meant heavier side effects, more frequent hospital stays, and of course, bigger bills. Sophie thanked the doctor for the update and hung up, her mind spinning. How could she possibly afford this? Even with her tips, even working double shifts, it wasn't enough. She returned to Jonathan and tried to keep her composure. She needs more treatment, Sophie said, voice trembling. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. I've already maxed out every credit line I have, and... Her eyes misted. Jonathan hesitated, appearing as if he wanted to comfort her. Sophie. I'm not wealthy by any means, he began. But I have some savings. I was planning on using it to travel after I lost my fiancé, finding myself, so to speak. But maybe... She cut him off with a raised hand. No, I can't ask that of you. It's too much. Thank you, but... He nodded, respecting her boundary. I understand. Just know you don't have to carry this alone. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Sophie felt a surge of gratitude. The desire to confide in him warred with her pride. In truth, she was drowning, and no lifeboat was in sight. Then her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. She frowned, opening it. The message read, I know about your pendant. Meet me at Hillside Motel Room 213 tonight at 8 p.m. Come alone. Her heart lurched. She showed Jonathan the message, her hands trembling. What is this? Who? He scanned it, his jaw tightening. No clue. But they claim to know about your pendant. This could be a trap. Sophie's pulse raced. Could it be Beckett? Or someone who knew him? or a new lead entirely. She thought of Detective Miller's warnings about being careful. But what if this was the break they needed? "I have to go," she said, her voice taut with determination. Jonathan's eyes flashed with concern. "Not alone, you're not. That's insane." The text had specifically said to come alone, which sent a chill up Sophie's spine. She crossed her arms, gaze fixed. What if I tell the cops and whoever this is bolts? She already felt that unstoppable sense of desperation creeping in. The same desperation that had her working double shifts at the diner. The same determination that drove her to keep her mother alive at all costs. The truth about the pendant and the break-in had tormented her for months. Now she might finally be on the brink of answers. Jonathan hesitated, but saw the resolve in her eyes. "All right. But if you're going, I'm going to be close by. I can't let you walk into something dangerous by yourself." Relief mingled with anxiety in Sophie's chest. She clenched her phone and breathed in, trying to steady her nerves. "Okay," she whispered. "Then let's find out who's behind all this." And so, with adrenaline coursing through their veins, Sophie and Jonathan left the cafe. Evening approached, bringing them closer to the hillside motel and deeper into the mystery that had already disrupted both of their lives in unimaginable ways. Hillside Motel was a drab single-story relic off a back road on the fringes of the city. Faded letters on a broken neon sign flickered half-heartedly. The parking lot was riddled with potholes, and the smell of stale cigarettes clung to the night air. It was just after 7:45 p.m. when Sophie pulled into a spot beneath a flickering street lamp. Jonathan rode in the passenger seat, scanning the area with unease. "Not exactly the Ritz," he muttered. Sophie cut the engine, her stomach in knots. "No kidding." She exhaled shakily. "Room 213. That must be around the corner." "I'll follow you at a distance," Jonathan said, resting a hand on her arm. "Stay alert." She nodded, heart thudding. This was madness, but she clung to the desperate hope that whoever had summoned her might unlock the mystery behind the stolen pendant. She touched the sapphire, seeking courage. Exiting the car, she walked toward the row of doors, the soles of her shoes crunching against loose gravel. The motel's shabby corridor was lined with battered vending machines. She spotted the tarnished number plate, 230. A quick glance over her shoulder assured her Jonathan was watching from behind a nearby pillar, ready to intervene if danger arose. With a trembling hand, she knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a gaunt figure in a grey hoodie. He peeked through the gap, his bloodshot eyes darting around. "You alone?" he whispered. Sophie swallowed hard. "Yes." He let her in quickly, shutting the door. The room's stale air reeked of damp carpet and cheap liquor. A single flickering lamp illuminated the figure, a man likely in his early 50s, with thinning hair and deep hollows under his eyes. He glanced at Sophie's pendant and nodded to himself. "I thought so," he rasped. "Your father's piece." Sophie's breath caught. "Who are you?" He limped closer, the hoodie sleeves pushed back to reveal arms lined with faded tattoos. "Name's George," he said, confirming Sophie's suspicions. "George Beckett." She stepped back warily, taking in his anxious manner, the twitch in his jaw. "How do you know this is my father's pendant?" she demanded, fists clenched. A sardonic smirk tugged at his lips. "Because I was there when it was taken." Rage flared in Sophie's chest. "You broke into my apartment. You took it." Beckett raised his palms in a defensive gesture. "Not exactly. Let's just say I was the middleman. But I know who hired me and why. Sophie's mind spun. Hired him. This went beyond a random burglary. Then why call me here? She spat, voice quivering. What do you want? He scratched his scruffy chin, pacing the worn carpet. Things got complicated. I didn't know about the significance of that pendant. I was just told to grab it along with your old man's papers. But after the job, the guy who hired me stiffed me on my cut. Left me high and dry. Sophie's anger warred with confusion. My father's papers. My father died years ago. What papers? Beckett shrugged. Some personal documents, letters. Don't know much else. He said it was critical to get that sapphire pendant, too. Something about it being the key to unlocking the past. I figured it was just stolen goods, you know. But then the guy double-crossed me. I had to get rid of the hot items, pawn shops, garage sales to stay off the radar. A chill crawled down Sophie's spine. Who was it? Who hired you? Beckett paused, eyes darting like he was debating whether to reveal the secret. He calls himself Martin Reynolds, related to your father, maybe. I never asked questions as long as the money was right. Didn't realize it'd turn into this mess. Sophie's heart lurched. Martin Reynolds. I have no uncle or cousin by that name. My father's side of the family is small. Beckett gave a ragged cough. All I know is he claimed to be your father's half-brother. Some big shot from out of state. Real paranoid guy, too. Showed up in fancy suits, always on a burner phone. Gave me an address. Your address, and told me to swipe that pendant and any documents with your father's name. The revelation hammered Sophie's senses. A half-brother her father never mentioned. Why would he want the pendant? And why resort to hiring a criminal to steal it? She forced her voice to remain steady. So you called me here to... What bargain? Are you going to blackmail me? A bitter laugh escaped Beckett's chapped lips. Blackmail you, lady. I'm on the run. That Martin guy is dangerous, and I need cash for a bus ticket out of state. Figured you might want to pay for info. Sophie steeled herself. I don't have money for that. I have hospital bills, I'm broke. Tell me what you know, or I'm leaving. Beckett's desperate eyes flickered. He seemed torn between greed and the risk of leaving empty-handed. Fine, he ground out. Martin Reynolds is hunting for something your old man stashed. Documents, maybe more. The pendant was rumored to lead to those documents. Some inheritance, I think. I don't have the details. After I grabbed the loot, I realized some items might be worthless, so I sold them. I kept the papers hidden, but Martin found me. So I burned them before he could get them. I guess he still wants the pendant, believing it might unlock a clue. Sophie's pulse pounded her mother's words about her father's secrets, echoing in her mind. She never imagined something like this. A hidden half-brother, an inheritance, a stolen heirloom that might be a clue. The sense of betrayal spiked. Where is Martin now? Beckett shook his head. No idea. If he knew you had the pendant back, he'd come for it. Better watch your back. Fear raced through Sophie's veins. The magnitude of this twisted family drama was too large to fully grasp. She turned to leave, but Beckett stepped forward. Wait, any spare cash you can give? I told you all I know. Sophie's entire body tensed. She pulled a wrinkled 20 from her wallet, barely enough to cover a motel meal, let alone a bus ticket. Still, she handed it over. That's all I can manage. He snatched it greedily. Thanks. Now go." We never met. Sophie rushed to the door, flung it open, and nearly collided with Jonathan, who had creeped closer, likely worried about her. She brushed past him wordless. He eyed Beckett warily, then followed Sophie outside the door, slamming shut behind them. The night air hit her like a shock as she inhaled in ragged gasps. Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You okay? What happened?" Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears. "We need to talk somewhere else." And so they hurried to her car, locked the doors, and sat in stunned silence under the flickering street lamp. Sophie clutched the pendant with trembling fingers, trying to process the bombshell she'd just received her father's potential half-brother out there, wanting the pendant for reasons that might tear open long-buried family secrets. For a moment she thought of her mother in the hospital, oblivious to the secrets swirling around them. Jonathan's voice was gentle but urgent. "Tell me everything." So she did, recounting Beckett's words in a hushed tone. By the time she finished, Jonathan's face had gone pale. "That means, whoever this Martin is, he could come after you, after the pendant." Sophie nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "And I don't know how to stop it." The pendant felt heavy against her skin, as if it held centuries of secrets. With no idea of Martin's location or motives beyond greed and possibly vengeance, Sophie was thrust into a dangerous maze. But one thing was clear: she needed to protect herself, protect her mother, and uncover the truth behind her father's hidden past before it destroyed everything she held dear. Late that night, Sophie found herself seated on the couch in her apartment, the small lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Jonathan paced the floor occasionally, glancing at his phone as though expecting a call that would never come. The tension was palpable, thick enough to suffocate. "How do we even start?" Jonathan asked, exhaling in frustration. "We don't have a location on Martin Reynolds, and Beckett isn't exactly reliable." Sophie nodded, staring at the pendant resting in her palm. "I only know that my father was an only child. That's what my mother always told me. Unless my grandfather had children we never knew about." She trailed off, overwhelmed. They had tried calling Detective Miller to update him, but he was out of the office. Sophie left a terse voicemail explaining the encounter at the motel without revealing too many sensitive details, and she asked him to call back as soon as possible. Now silence enveloped them, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Suddenly, Sophie remembered something. She shot to her feet and hurried to the closet where she kept old boxes of family memorabilia. Jonathan paused in his pacing to watch as she pulled out a dusty shoebox labeled Dad's Letters. "I haven't looked through this stuff in ages," she said, excitement creeping into her weary voice. "Maybe there's a clue here." Jonathan knelt beside her as she opened the box. Stacks of faded photographs, postcards, and letters spilled out. Sophie carefully spread them on the coffee table. Many were addressed to her mother, some to her father from old friends. Then she found a worn manila envelope containing a photocopied birth certificate, her father's. She scanned it, her eyes widening. She whispered, pointing to the document. Listed under father's name was Michael Reynolds, but there was a scribbled note in the margin. "Not sure if correct. Father, ask Aunt Harriet." Sophie stared at Jonathan, the puzzle pieces swirling in her mind. My father never talked much about his own dad. If Michael Reynolds wasn't his real father, maybe there was a half-sibling in the picture after all. They dug deeper, flipping through letters and notes. Jonathan picked up an old photograph, a black-and-white shot of a man in a 1970s suit, a woman by his side. On the back, someone had scrawled, "Mom and Dad, 1974. Sophie recognized the woman as her grandmother, Harriet Reynolds, who died before Sophie was born. The man was presumably Michael Reynolds. Jonathan studied the photo. Could it be that your grandmother had a relationship with another man who fathered your dad? That might mean your father had half-siblings through Michael or someone else. Sophie's heart pounded. It's possible. My father never mentioned it, though. Or maybe he didn't know the full truth. They continued sifting until Jonathan discovered an old letter with a postmark from Kansas City, dated years ago. It was addressed to Harriet, but the writing was scrawled in a different hand. Sophie read it aloud. Harriet. I cannot stay silent any longer. The truth about James's paternity must come out. Our son deserves to know his real father. Please, for his sake, let's resolve this. M. Sophie's hands trembled. So my grandmother was hiding something about my dad's paternity. Jonathan's eyes flickered with realization. And if this Martin Reynolds is connected to that side of the family, he might have discovered your father's identity and believed your father had some inheritance or property that rightfully belonged to them. Sophie's mind reeled. Her father might have been an heir to something that Martin believed was also his. That could explain the burglary, the desperate search for documents proving lineage or property claims. A mixture of hurt and curiosity burned in Sophie's chest. Why hadn't her mother mentioned any of this? Or maybe Caroline truly didn't know. She was already ill, and burdening her with these revelations felt cruel. Still, Sophie realized she might have no choice but to ask her mother about Harriet and these old letters. Jonathan placed a comforting hand on Sophie's shoulder. We'll figure this out, he murmured. She glanced at him, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm afraid, Jonathan. This Martin guy, he could be dangerous. And my mum, she's so weak. I don't want her caught in the crossfire. I understand, Jonathan said, voice firm. But we also have a lead now. We know your father's paternity is in question, which might point us in Martin's direction if we can figure out who he is. And we have Detective Miller he can help. Sophie inhaled, nodding. I'm tired, Jonathan. This is so much to process. He reached out gently, pulling her into a hug. The gesture stunned her, but she allowed herself to rest her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of another person who genuinely cared. She barely knew him, yet everything about this bizarre circumstance had forged a bond between them. After a moment, she pulled away and mustered a small, shaky smile. You should get some sleep too. The couch is still yours if you need it. Jonathan offered a reassuring nod. I'll stay. I don't think either of us should be alone right now. Exhausted and emotionally drained, Sophie retreated to her bedroom. She slid the dusty shoebox under the bed, her mind still churning with the revelations it contained. She wondered what new twists might await them once the sun rose. Would Martin Reynolds appear demanding the pendant? Would Detective Miller find a link to Beckett that could lead to an arrest? For a long time, sleep eluded her. She stared at the ceiling, the shapes of passing headlights crawling across the walls. Her father's face haunted her thoughts, as did the notion of a secret half-brother, hell-bent on finding an inheritance. Clutching the pendant against her chest, she silently prayed for the strength to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that her mother, her past, and her future all hung in the balance. 2 tense days passed. Sophie heard nothing further from Beckett or the mysterious Martin Reynolds. She visited her mother in the hospital each morning, grappling with mounting stress over the new treatments. Detective Miller left her a voicemail indicating he'd done some research on George Beckett, confirming the man had a long rap sheet for burglary, but no fixed address. The lead was cold for now. On the second evening, Sophie was finishing a shift at the Redwood Diner, Jonathan quietly sipping coffee at the corner booth. He had insisted on accompanying her for safety, and to her surprise, her boss, Teresa, didn't mind him hanging around. The dinner crowd was thinning out when Sophie's phone rang a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered, stepping behind the counter. A deep, measured voice spoke Sophie Reynolds. "My name is Martin Reynolds. We need to talk about your father." Her hand trembled so violently that she nearly dropped the phone. She gestured wildly at Jonathan, who jumped up alarmed. Sophie forced her voice to remain calm. "Why did you hire Beckett to steal my father's pendant?" A pause on the other end. "Because that pendant belongs to me, or rather to my branch of the family. Your father had no rightful claim to it. Harriet lied about who his father was. The inheritance was never his. I want what is mine." Sophie's anger flared. "You think a piece of jewelry can justify breaking into my home, terrorizing me, and rummaging through my father's things?" Martin's voice turned cold. "That pendant is more than just jewelry. It's the key to a safety deposit box in Kansas City, left by my father, your grandfather. The documents inside prove my father's ownership of certain lands and business holdings. James, your father, should never have had it in the first place. He was not the legitimate heir, and yet Harriet took that key from our family." Sophie's heart pounded. A safety deposit box, inheritance, lands. It was like something out of a soap opera. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to process. "That pendant was given to me. It was my father's. I don't care about your inheritance, but you had no right. I had every right." Martin cut in the steel in his voice, sending a chill through Sophie. "You want to do the moral thing, return it. I'm prepared to pay you a handsome amount if you cooperate." A swirl of outrage and temptation battled inside her. The money could help pay for her mother's treatment. But the idea of giving up her father's pendant to this man who was willing to steal and terrorize left her disgusted. She forced a steady breath. "Meet me at the Redwood Diner in 1 hour. We'll talk." Sophie hung up, her entire body shaking. Jonathan rushed over, eyes wide. "Was that Martin?" She nodded, explaining in a rapid whisper about the safety deposit box and Martin's claims. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "He's coming here." Sophie clenched her fists, tears threatening. "I won't let him take my father's pendant. But if there's a way to get the money for my mom's treatments, maybe I can reason with him." Jonathan pulled her into a quick, tight embrace. "We'll handle this together. Let me call Detective Miller and let him know." "You don't have to face Martin alone." Sophie agreed, relieved. After a quick call to the detective, who promised to send a nearby officer undercover the stage, was set for a confrontation. An hour later, the diner was all but empty, except for Sophie, Jonathan, and a lone customer who was actually an off-duty officer sitting in a back booth. At 9 p.m. sharp, the bell over the diner door jingled. In strode a tall, imposing man in a dark suit, hair slicked back, eyes scanning the place like a predator. Sophie felt her stomach twist. This was Martin Reynolds. He spotted Sophie and approached Jonathan, rising from his seat protectively. "You must be Sophie," Martin said, offering a thin, humorless smile. "And who is this?" He eyed Jonathan with mild contempt. "That's Jonathan," Sophie said stiffly. "He's with me." Martin's gaze flicked dismissively over Jonathan. "I'm here for the pendant," he said, voice low. I will compensate you generously enough to cover whatever hospital bills you have. You walk away, no one gets hurt." Sophie stood firm, meeting his gaze. "That pendant is all I have left of my father. I'll consider giving you the key to your deposit box, but the necklace itself, the heart with the sapphire, stays with me." Martin's nostrils flared. "You're in no position to negotiate. I can take it by force if I choose." He took a menacing step forward. Immediately, Jonathan stepped between them. "Back off," he warned, his voice tight. Martin's icy glare shifted to Jonathan, then softened with a derisive chuckle. "You'd be wise not to test me, boy." His tone dropped dangerously. "Now, Miss Reynolds, you either cooperate or I will make your life very difficult." Sophie's heart hammered, but she refused to back down. "And if I do give you what you want, how do I know you'll live up to your end of the bargain?" Martin smirked, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a checkbook. "I'll write the check right now. $50,000. More than enough to handle your mother's treatment. Then you hand over the pendant key and chain." Sophie trembled, tears welling. That money could save her mother. But giving away her father's pendant felt like losing him all over again. And what if Martin's check bounced, or he reneged on the deal afterward? Detective Miller emerged from the back booth, revealing himself. "Martin Reynolds, Aurora PD," he said, his voice echoing through the diner. "We've got reason to believe you hired George Beckett for a burglary. You're under suspicion of conspiracy to commit theft and possible intimidation." Martin's face twisted in rage. He made a move as if to bolt, but the off-duty officer blocked the door. Detective Miller motioned, and within seconds, Martin was cornered. Sophie watched the scene unfold in stunned relief. Martin spat furious threats, promising legal retribution. But the detective calmly read him his rights, telling him he'd have to answer questions at the station. When Martin turned his gaze to Sophie one last time, it was filled with venom. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "That pendant belongs to my father's legacy. I will get it back." Sophie clutched the silver heart. Her voice trembled, but she stood her ground. "No, you won't. Not this time." Moments later, uniformed officers arrived. They led Martin Reynolds away in handcuffs. His expensive suit rumpled his face, a mask of rage. As he was shoved into the back of a squad car, Sophie felt a mix of victory and sorrow. The confrontation was over, but the family secrets might haunt her for years. Detective Miller assured her that Martin would be investigated, and if the courts found him guilty, he could face jail time, or at least strict restitution measures. The important thing was that he'd no longer be a threat. When the diner finally fell silent, Sophie slumped into a booth, exhausted. Jonathan slid in beside her, relief evident on his face. He reached for her hand, his voice soft. "You okay?" Sophie wiped away a tear, nodding slowly. "I think so," she said, her words quivering. The future was uncertain, her mother's health precarious, but at least the pendant, her father's memory, was safe. And she wasn't facing this alone. In that moment, she realized how life could change in an instant. Just days ago, she was a humble waitress who'd lent a hand to a stranger with car trouble. Now that stranger had become her friend, someone who stood beside her against forces she never knew existed. She also understood that sometimes the greatest legacies aren't monetary inheritances, but the love and resilience passed down through a simple, precious heirloom. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous journey, where a small act of kindness sparked the unraveling of deep family secrets. Sophie's bravery, Jonathan's loyalty, and the cherished pendant at the heart of it all remind us that hope can triumph over greed and despair. Even when the storms of life seem overwhelming, compassion and determination can guide us through the darkest nights. Now that you've witnessed Sophie's trials and her ultimate triumph, please show your support. Like this video. If you enjoyed the story, share it with friends who love dramatic tales filled with twists, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping content. Every act of engagement helps us bring you more stories of resilience, discovery, and hope. Thank you for being part of Sophie's extraordinary adventure, and remember, sometimes the simplest kindness can lead to life-changing encounters. Stay tuned for more.